Why did Japan, a nation with so few resources, dare to challenge the industrial superpower of the United States in the Pacific? What were the secret calculations and the desperate gambles behind the infamous attack on Pearl Harbor? Today, we're diving deep into the untold story of Japan's Pacific strategy, a plan far more complex and desperate than you might imagine. This isn't just a story about battles. It's about a clash of empires, a high-stakes game of global chess where every single move could lead to either total victory or complete annihilation. Let's rewind to the early 20th century. Japan is a rising power, hungry for resources and desperate for recognition on the world stage. It sees itself as the rightful leader of Asia, destined to create what it called the Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere. But there was a huge obstacle standing in its way. The Western colonial powers, especially the United States. These nations controlled the vital resources Japan needed to fuel its ambitions. Most importantly, oil. In 1941, after Japan expanded its military presence into French Indochina, the United States dropped the hammer and imposed a devastating oil embargo. For the Japanese war machine, this was a death sentence. Suddenly, with only about a year's worth of oil reserves left in the tank, Japan found itself at a critical crossroads. They could either negotiate with the West, which would likely mean abandoning their imperial dreams, or they could go to war to seize the oil-rich Dutch East Indies, what we now know as Indonesia. They chose war. But there was a problem. Attacking the Dutch East Indies directly would inevitably bring the United States into the conflict, mainly because of America's significant military presence in the Philippines, which sat right on the flank of their planned invasion route. The Japanese High Command, led by influential figures like Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, knew they couldn't win a long, drawn-out war against the industrial giant that was America. It just wasn't possible. So, their entire strategy was based on a single, audacious gamble. A swift, decisive, knockout blow that would cripple the U.S. Pacific Fleet and, they hoped, shatter American morale. This was the cold, hard logic behind the surprise attack on Pearl Harbor. The goal wasn't to conquer America. That was never the plan. The goal was to buy time. They believed that by knocking out the U.S. fleet, they could rapidly conquer all of Southeast Asia, secure its precious resources, and then establish an impenetrable defensive perimeter across the Pacific. They gambled that a shocked and war-weary United States would then be forced to negotiate a peace treaty, one that would allow Japan to keep its newly won empire. So, on December 7th, 1941, the plan was set in motion. From a purely tactical perspective, the attack on Pearl Harbor was a masterpiece. Japanese carrier planes sank or severely damaged numerous American battleships. In the months that followed, Japan's forces swept across the Pacific with stunning, almost unbelievable speed. They took the Philippines, Malaya, the impregnable fortress of Singapore, and the Dutch East Indies. For a moment, it seemed their incredible gamble had paid off. They had their oil, they had their resources, and they had their defensive line stretching thousands of miles. But they had made a critical, fatal miss. The American aircraft carriers, the ships that would soon prove to be the most important naval vessel of the war, were not at Pearl Harbor on that day. They were out at sea. More importantly, Japan fundamentally misunderstood the American psyche. The attack didn't shatter American morale. It unified and enraged a nation, awakening what Admiral Yamamoto famously and perhaps apocryphally called a sleeping giant. The desire for negotiation vanished, replaced by a singular focus on total victory. The turning point came just 6 months later, at the pivotal Battle of Midway. Here, the United States, having brilliantly cracked Japanese naval codes, was able to lay a devastating trap. In a single, catastrophic battle that raged 4 days, Japan lost 4 of its best and most experienced aircraft carriers, the very heart of its naval power. The loss was irreplaceable. Japan's industrial capacity simply couldn't keep up with America's. While the U.S. was building new ships and planes at an astonishing rate, Japan was struggling just to replace its losses. From Midway onward, the strategic initiative shifted permanently to the Allies. Japan was now on the defensive, forced into a brutal war of attrition it was mathematically destined to lose. Japan's strategy also had another fatal flaw. one rooted deep in its military culture. It was based on the idea of a single, decisive battle, a concept from samurai tradition known as Kantai-Kasan. They were constantly seeking that one big showdown, that one glorious naval engagement that would win the entire war in a single afternoon. But modern industrial warfare didn't work that way. The United States, under brilliant commanders like Admiral Nimitz and General MacArthur, adopted a completely different strategy: island hopping. They realized they didn't need to conquer every single heavily fortified Japanese-held island. Instead, they would bypass the strongholds, capture strategically important but more lightly defended islands to build air bases, and slowly, methodically, tightened the noose around the Japanese home islands. This clever approach completely neutralized Japan's defensive perimeter and brought American long-range bombers within striking distance of Japan itself. As the war dragged on, the initial strategic goals of resource acquisition and a negotiated peace became a distant, almost forgotten memory. The fight devolved into a desperate, brutal struggle for national survival. The co-prosperity sphere was revealed for what it truly was: a brutal colonial empire that viciously exploited the very people it claimed to be liberating. Within Japan, the military's control over the government and society was absolute. Any talk of surrender was considered treason, punishable by death. This led to the fanatical, almost unbelievable resistance seen on islands like Iwo Jima and Okinawa. It led to the horrifying use of kamikaze pilots, a final, desperate testament to the hopelessness of a nation facing inevitable and total defeat. The war that began with a calculated gamble for an empire ended in a storm of firebombing, 2 atomic bombs, and unconditional surrender. Looking back, Japan's Pacific strategy was a tragic product of ambition, desperation, and a profound, catastrophic underestimation of its enemy. It was a bold, complex, and ultimately doomed plan. The belief that a swift, tactical strike could defeat a nation with 10 times its industrial output was a fatal fantasy. The secrets of this strategy reveal a crucial lesson in history. Wars are not just won by brilliant tactics on the battlefield. They are won by industrial might, by logistical strength, and by a deep understanding of the will and character of your opponent. Japan failed on all these counts, leading to a conflict that reshaped the world and left scars that remain to this day. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this deep dive into history interesting, please hit that like button and subscribe for more content that uncovers the hidden stories behind major world events. Let me know in the comments what other historical strategies you'd like to see explored. See you in the next video.